Hey Sunrise, it's Andrew here with your small group questions for this week as we look at Matthew 5:13 through 16 as we begin to make this transition from the beatitudes into the remainder of the Sermon on the Mount. And so as we look at 13 through 16, and we have this, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. We have these two illustrations that Christ uses to bring forward the reality of what life looks like in the kingdom. Okay, so how do these illustrations that you are the light and you are the salt connect back to the Beatitudes? How is this the next phase of what Jesus is talking about in this sermon? So thinking about how are these things connected? How are the Beatitudes connected to the salt and light illustrations Jesus now uses? And thinking about that as well, how is it connected to persecution? Why is this the encouragement that Jesus goes to immediately after discussing persecution and the blessedness of those who are persecuted? Why do you feel this would be the necessary point for Jesus to make after that statement? And so as you think about those initial context clues and context discussions, it then leads us into the text itself. And so what do you think of when you hear these illustrations that you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world? What images come to mind? Again, Jesus uses lots of common everyday images and parables to teach us. So how do these do that? So you think about it as you think about salt. What are the many different uses salt has? How does salt play itself out in everyday life? How is that a picture of the Christian faith? Then in it, we have then the opposite. So again, we have this blessing and to a degree a curse, if you will. So you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, it has no purpose anymore. What's the significance then of that contrast that he's making? And how does this then connect to the whole picture of life in the kingdom? Same with the idea of being the light of the world. So why then does he then use the negatives, like the city on the hill can't be hidden? You don't light a light to then hide it. So what are the pictures that we're being encouraged in living out the faith? So you look at these pictures, you begin to think through the intricacies of Jesus' teaching here. We live out as salt, we live out as light. What is the connection to Christ in these texts? So we think about the light of the world. In the book of John, Jesus will say he is the light of the world. So how do those things connect together? How do we see this ultimately play out in the call for good works? Now, what is he teaching us when he then calls us, therefore, to live out the faith before men, doing good works, so that people will glorify our Father in heaven? How do our works lead to the glorification of God? How do these things work together? Not only how do they lead to it, but how does the world glorify God through those actions? So there's a lot to unpack in this text, and I hope that you'll spend some time thinking about the illustration, how that applies to us, and how we can live it out better day by day as we look to apply the Beatitudes into our lives throughout the remainder of our text. Hope you'll spend some time again in the Word in our small group as we unpack this in discussions. And again, as we continue to unpack Jesus' teaching on how do we live life in the kingdom. Can't wait to worship with you guys on Sunday. See you soon.